producer and director of this episode, Eric Goldman. So, it's kind of a classic thing in fiction, especially in any sort of genre fiction, is the what-if scenario, the alternate reality scenario. This being the second to last episode, a person interested in just seeing this is the time we want to delve into the what could have been of it all.
Yeah, this was an episode we talked about doing a really long time ago, and then Johnny had been on me to direct like 2 seasons ago. And by the way, a big lesson I learned is if you ever get that feeling you're completely terrified of doing something because you're not sure how it'll work out, then you definitely should do that thing. So this was that episode. It sort of arrived at a perfect time, just being second to last episode. And we all this time we talked about it. For some reason it hadn't come up, and I was like, well, if I'm going to direct, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to get Michael Emerson to be in like every scene because he's amazing. And it worked out pretty well with Michael. He was just a complete joy to work with.
I'm sure there must be there's so much going on with it being the end of the series and planning for the finale. So was there any trepidation of it being your director promote debut right at that point? Like, do you think I should have taken Joe up on that offer a couple years ago, or did it just seem like no, we're doing this now?
I think it was kind of thing too. Like, our crew was really tight, and it is kind of like a family. And, Joey gave me a lot of great instructions before I left, and I remember running into JJ actually at Maureen's wedding. And he came up to me and said, "So you're going to direct, huh?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, just make sure you do one thing." He said, "In every scene, just design one shot that you don't know whether you can pull it off or not, because you can always resort back to conventional coverage, but try to go for it." And so as you can see, like I went crazy with the wonders in this, but that was a lot of help. And Joe gave me some great books, and before I left, and we had an amazing producer director, Chris Fisher, but most importantly, David Inslee, who's our DP, was there with me in every shot, and the shot was to go through the whole thing. I felt ready, and at a certain point, when you have John Nolan and Michael Emerson together, just monologuing, it's amazing. They're both stage actors, they can handle it,
I love that you said JJ's one advice was lens flare. Go for it. Speaking of John Nolan, tell your uncle, dude. When I encouraged him to direct, I didn't mean that.
He kept turning me and say, "Is the governor called yet?" Looking for a recruit.
Greer, you really saw in this episode, not that we haven't seen before, but in this episode should underline what a true believer he was. I mean, he's the villain, but he wasn't I will destroy the world villain. He was definitely I'm doing what's right. Did you really, when you're conceiving of how you take him out, did it just seem like, oh, of course, he's a guy who would just be willing to go all the way and the ultimate sacrifice?
Definitely. I think, the most compelling villains, we always say this, are the ones that have a distinct point of view. It seems rational and completely logical to them. And in this particular instance, Vince really was on the precipice of taking out. We thought it was kind of fun having an idea of Samaritan's completely taking over the NSA. So sort of a belly of the beast episode where Finch has to go in and deploy this virus. But the whole time what Greer's trying to discern is whether or not Harold is the only one who can activate the virus. And in that moment when he realizes what a control freak Harold is, of course he would be the only one, he knows he's got it. And as long as we don't leave this room, then Greer's dream will come true.
So an important question for whoever's working on the person of interest would Harold Dashwood? Would that be his birthday?
That was Eric Goldman. I give him credit for coming up with that. I thought that was really inspiring. And, of course, those long-term fans of the show remember the importance of that book when Finch proposed to Grace.
The password obviously was going to be such a big deal. Did you guys go over various things of what it could be, and especially it's so good about callbacks on that show. So did you think a lot about, okay, what are we diving into here?
Well, we thought about Stan, but I think every derivation that's been exhausted.
Now, let's talk about this season overall, because it's the end, and it's being marketed as such. But when you began making it, there wasn't this definitive decision. So, how much crafting it did you have to sort of balance that, and in the back of your mind think, what if it's not the final season as far as what your arc was going to be?
I feel like we had a good idea that this was probably it when we started it. But you also didn't want to give up on the essential franchise of the show, which is kind of, the random access aspect of it, the number of the week. So it was balancing those things. But no, I think we set off certainly with the intention of Ruth's transformation into a machine. We knew from the beginning that this was the season in which we had to get to that. If we'd had more seasons, we could have waited a little while for that. But we knew, as this was most likely the final season, that was kind of the last big piece of the puzzle that come into place. So we knew we had to design from that and to call Michael and Amy last summer. I don't know, when did we make this 2 years ago? Then call them last summer and read them in on what we were doing. So we were headed there. Sometimes these things happen. You see some beloved shows this year that just kind of vanished without a trace, without the creators having the opportunity to land the plane. And we wanted that situation. The way this is actually really, we would have loved to have kept going. We would have loved to have done more seasons, but this is actually kind of a great position to be in. You got 13. You're probably not getting any more after that. So that gives you, if they give us a full season order, we might have tried this sort of tap dance for another season after that, and gotten called out. But this is kind of perfect.
Did you have, and I guess I'll maybe ask you a little more about this later today, after you guys to tease the finale, but did you have in the back of your mind, because I remember you talking to JJ a few months ago about how you definitely were writing the season finale, and there's also a series finale, but was there also in your mind the, but if, ... as far as where it could possibly go?
I think the premise of the show, the idea that there's an artificial superintelligence that can do these things, is still one that's, relevant. A phrase, but I think, regardless of the characters, it's something I can see another incarnation of someday. But I think by the time the bloodbath of the finale is over, you might have different thoughts. Like, we just need a cool graphic overlay. Then my directing style. I get looking at Samara going, I don't remember it being a checkerboard.
You talked about how you knew for a long time, obviously, where Ruth's story was going, and as far as the machine is concerned. Last time you and I talked to you guys was the week that episode was going to air. And so what's it been like for you to see, the episode aired and, the reaction of people of this character to people sort of absorbing what happened to Ruth?
Yeah, they love the character. No one loves the character more than us, but they seem to love the episode too, which is great. I mean, that's the thrill of these things, and the paradox of them. These great characters take on a journey. We want the journey to have inflection points and reversals and tragedy. This is why we write this stuff, and so it's terribly exciting to watch that unfold. And it's that you're very much talking about often in these episodes. You want that chill test, and you're passing the chill test, and you watch it and you go, ooh. Because that's the closest as a creator you can come to experiencing the thing that the audience is going to watch. Some of these things are on off. Some of them, if you create an episode that's good enough, you can't actually turn off the reaction. Then you've got something good. And every time we watch that episode, it's like, oh, why did we do this?
Do you, when you're going to kill a character, do you have that debate of like, okay, should we do it now? Turn it off for a little while? Do you always have to think about how much more story do you want to tell beforehand?
Well, we killed Elias twice, actually.
That's true.
The first time around, we were like, that just wasn't satisfying enough. We really need to bring him back and kill him right.
I think Kevin Chapman's character was pitched as a fatality every season from the beginning. So there was an ongoing conversation with Chapman.
She shot people just like the pilot.
He did. But we had a terribly embarrassing experience with Chapman at one point where he came to the writers' room first season. Can I tell us? Oh, yeah. He came to visit. He was in LA back coming out for meetings. And that morning, one of our writers, Maybe Amos, pitched a fantastic arc that ended with the death of Kevin Jack. It was the end of the first season. And we all sat in the room and you felt the essential rightness of it. You felt the kind of like, oh yeah. I mean, that sucks because we love Chappie, but that is fantastic.
And like, Kevin's here. All the way from New York to lunch.
And then Chappie shows up for lunch, and he has lunch in the writer's room. And it's a group of stone-faced writers saying, hi, Kevin, good to see you. And afterwards, we went to talk to my office afterwards, and he goes, something's up.
With that sword dangling over your head?
He said, listen, if I'm not coming back next week, you just have to tell me.
You got spared there. You got spared.
But you know what happened is some people on the internet were calling it, right? They were calling the shot, and we're just contrarian, so screw that. Kevin lives.
In a couple minutes, we'll take audience questions. There's two mics set up here. Two mic questions. This episode allowed you a lot of things. Allowed you to sort of look back at the characters' histories, and we were talking about Fresco, like remind you he wasn't the good guy when the show began, but he stayed on that path. It also allowed you to bring back a lot of faces from the past. Some who had died. Szymanski, we had Cole, Henry Peck. We made one nice appearance here, and then of course shot them out. With the show ending, did you know that was definitely something you wanted to do? You have done such a great job of building up this huge group of characters and sort of see who you could fit in, whether it be an alternate reality or not.
Yeah, there were so many other characters we wanted to bring. We had just a whole smorgasbord. Everybody. We wanted Annie Parise, we wanted Michael Kelly, but there's an availability issue with some of them. But we tried to focus on who were the characters that were defining for our characters in terms of the decision they made or an inflection point in their lives and what had happened. Obviously, when you see someone who was killed on the show in the alternate reality, it kind of throws you. You're like, okay, I realize I'm watching a simulation. Because it was weird. It's like it's not a flashback. It's an alternate reality. So I tried to go for like a more saturated style, closer eye lines on Harold as well, so sort of draw you in and draw you out. Ingrid's voiceover narration helped as well. But there were so many other characters we would have loved to have shown on this show. But I think the big import, of course, was for Harold Finch to come to an understanding, because he had all this regret going up on him, and he almost wished that he could go with him. But the truth of the matter is, if he hadn't, the world would be so much more fucked.
A couple characters that they're personal favorites that I was thinking about, wondering if you were going to bring it back to the final season. Curious if you debated it and what might have been availability, but Zoe, and then one whose fate, I guess, is a little ambiguous, but Control. The two of them.
They took on Kelly now. We actually did it with the fight, but we just didn't have, as you said, schedule for the fight to some degree, but also we didn't have a story with itself. Two great characters, and we wish we had a chance to read them. Sadly, both very busy ladies. We didn't quite get
We talked obviously about the importance of the Root and Shaw relationship to a lot of fans, and while that's the most prevalent, it's not the only time where early on the audience might be responding to something and thinking about, that was interesting chemistry there. You guys are going to respond to that too, but is it an interesting balancing act for you on a show like this, which is not about romances, where you want to be true to those characters and real life feelings, but also at a certain point you have to think, is this not person's interest if we go down this path too much?
I thought it was a romance. This is as romantic as I get.
Well, it's romance if everyone is there. If everyone is fair. But did you always ever have to think even with whether it be Reese dating someone on the side and we saw some of, but how much is too much of that? Did you think about sort of what's the right balance in the world of personal interest?
We've written a lot of different things and shot a number of things that wound up on the cutting room floor because it just totally didn't feel right. I feel like it's jarring when you see it totally on our show. But I think, we've allowed the audience's imagination to fill in, those backstories and ideas and that longing. And I think that somehow that's even more powerful.
We did get a great mention here of Carter. Nice response from the crowd. That's a character that, she's been gone for a while, but really brought up a lot. Compared to some shows, you might have a character die, and once in a while you might mention them. It felt like you guys made sure to mention her importance to Reese. And here, as you're talking about possibly having her pop up, but either way, was it you want to make sure that to see what happened to her in this alt reality was integral.
Yeah, I think Carter definitely would have lived if she'd never met Teen Machine. It's pretty clear. What you didn't see, actually, we had a shot where he swung around, and on the desk there was actually a picture of Cal Beecher. She was not happy married, but it just wasn't room for it in the shot. So, I think Carter's life would have been markedly different. Had she not married any of her tragic demise, would never have.
With the machine now, of speaking has roots. Is it, there's been, I've seen fan debate about this because I discussed it. How much is the machine, would you consider it free versus something bigger than that because the machine is a god, as we've said, it's sort of the next level in that evolution?
Yeah, I think even the distinction is kind of irrelevant given the nature of the machine. Root is in there. She explains it in the 10th episode. In order to predict what they do, the machine has to completely model it. 99.6% accurate. So there's a little root in there, and it's sort of adopting. The machine has adopted root, and it's kind of a long interface, as we said, for a couple of seasons as kind of its ambassador. And it natural next ride. I think the machine really likes your style. I think it's the biggest part of it. And so I think you imagine that's root talking to you as sort of as the spokesperson for the machine, the mouthpiece for the machine. And that's we really wanted to play for 5 seasons with this idea of artificial intelligence being different, not singular, not restricted to one. It's parallel processing, and it's multiple threads, and one of those threads is root.
So the other question, we'll come up to the mic, but while anyone's doing that, I want to ask follow-up to that, which is that so far, I think we've only seen Finch hear the machine talk his root. Now, at the end of this is a tricky question, I guess, I'm going to ask you, because the end of this episode means the entire machine state jeopardy, but might anyone else hear the machine talk his root? You'll find out after the film or a week and a half.
I'd like to point something out here. The point of view shots we have of the machine and also of Samaritan. It was something we established to look up early on in the show, and one of our crew members is actually here right now. Chris Stoller is the gentleman who moved to Austin. And he's largely responsible for establishing that look on the show, which now has kind of become ubiquitous. I've seen it in other shows and movies now all the time, but it's just to convey the idea of the surveillance thing.
Does anyone have any questions in the audience? Don't be shy. There you go.
Oh yeah, you guys kind of hinted in some interviews that CBS kind of forced you to make the season have more history weeks and wanted you kind of to be more serialized. What were kind of the major things that got left out of the season because of CBS?
What are you getting at, sir?
Well, I think they were forced to do anything. Obviously, it was a conversation, but it was a conversation. And I don't think there's anything that's missing from the season. There weren't any story moves. I just think what a fantastic episode. Beautiful episode. I'm very excited for the finale as well. So I don't think it's hurt the quality of the episode. But it would have been nice to spend a little bit more time exploring. Well, it would have been nice to spend a little more time exploring the relationship between you and Shaw. It would have been nice to spend a little more time exploring sort of Dark Finch and where that character goes. The weird thing after 103 hours, and I guess at least personally, if the creative endeavor has been successful, if you're reluctant to set it down. After 103 hours, I feel like we have lots to say about these characters. The amazing cast that we had, the amazing writers that we got a chance to work with, the amazing crew that we got a chance to work with in New York. You always want more. But I don't think we left that. I don't think we left that anything essential.
No, I don't either. I think what's extremely difficult to do today, or maybe ever, is to tell a serialized show on broadcast television. It's should because of volume. Most of the time, you're doing 22 episodes a year, and we talked about at a certain point, if you're not watching every episode, the show becomes an obstacle unto itself in terms of understanding what the hell's going on. It was also complicated by the fact that we didn't have a streaming option for about 4 seasons. So I think that the landscape of that is changing dramatically. CBS is a company that knows its business very well. It knows what works for them internationally and so forth. It was extremely. It was a difficult thing to be able to sustain this larger story this long.
And I think it's worth pointing out for the record that we told CBS what the show was going to be about from the very beginning. It was going to be about AI in the next 5 minutes in the future. They were incredibly supportive of the show for 5 years. No regrets on that. On that end, so I'm very proud of what we were able to make. It's sad to imagine that we don't get to keep making these stories with this amazing group, but very happy for what we did get to do.
Thank you.
The show is obviously a very different show than when it began, and as you're talking about, serialization, I joked with you guys about rereading my review of the pilot Person of Interest and laughing because I was very presumptive and I was like, oh, this is well done, but it's obviously going to be a case of the week show, and for assuming forever, which some people were very into. For you guys, knowing that you wanted to bring in these more overarching plot lines, did it go at the pace you thought it would? Were there things that happened quicker or happened later? Because First Fisher said, say season 3 is when you say it's very different than what the show began in.
You got to build the world. I mean, you got to build the character. I mean, when Elias hit in season 1, I think that was a real signal for people that this show is not going to be just standalone case of the week. By the way, I wish we could stop using those terms in such a derogatory fashion because some of my favorite episodes are actually standalone episodes on this show. For some reason, the world of television now has been divided into these two camps where people are either contemptuous of a standalone case of the week, or there's an audience that hates it when you talk about Samaritan, or when it's bizarre. It shouldn't be so exclusive. I think it's silly, and I think there's a craft to telling a story, whether it's a standalone episode that kicks ass and is really compelling in and of itself, and then there's a show that has a tremendous mythology. And I think this show can do both, and it can do them well, and I think there should be more shows like that.
One thing I think that I admired a lot as Christmas went on is that if you take those the weeks, as it were, and there would be something that would build out of it, and it could be a character arc, or it could be a character that might, Elias is probably a more dramatic example because he popped up a lot, but there are people who might pop up once or twice after that. For you guys, is that always a thing? Like, you might not know when you're crafting that episode, but you go, that's interesting, you should revisit that, and maybe we'll put it down the line.
You have this kind of recruitment tool that you have a case to lose, and you found a character and a great actor you like working with, and wait. You take it back to writers, and the writer comes back and says, oh, that guy's great. You want to perform that kind of guy, great. Watch the performance, it's exciting. We haven't killed them. Although in some cases, I'm thinking of, who was when we killed them? Who killed him?
It was Lambert.
Lambert, yes.
You never saw, well, you got shot, but he didn't. We took the guy in part.
I think Jay, visual effects, was literally had to take the bullet out of his foot. When you're working with, I think part of that was that, wonderful actor. Also, there's one feedback who's really cute.
I think Amanda wanted to work with him.
Any more audience questions? There you go.
I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to phrase this. You have a very active fan club online, as you know. And one of the questions I have is, how much did you play to the fan club? Because there's little things that we catch when you watch it all along. And I wonder if while you're writing those, you intentionally do those, and these people will catch that.
Definitely a little bit. I mean, one of the reasons why it's been so exciting to work on the show is the fan support has been extraordinary. For you guys and for us. And I think, one of the extraordinary things about the show is that I think everyone who's working on the show in season 5 had been there from at least season 2 or possibly from season 1. Everyone was there basically there from the beginning, so we kind of fans themselves. And that's part of why all the callbacks pay off. A bunch of really good writers, an amazing writing support staff who love the show and love all the bits and pieces of it, kept looking for opportunities to plug back in pieces that we haven't quite gotten back to.
Yeah, it can become kind of a feedback loop, but what's really interesting too is we always send writers out to produce the episode on the set, and so we even had crews come up who were fans of the show and say to you like, when are you going to bring the voice back? Why don't you bring the voice back? We brought the voice back and killed it. People wanted that, I guess. Like it's something that's like an untied knot or something.
You use the term 5 minutes in the future, and we've talked in the past about how the show being sci-fi short, it fits into sci-fi. And there was a line in here Greer had about the Samaritan will say this on this world or another. And I was like, person of interest goes to space. Was that always interesting for you guys to also sort of debate, how much is too much, on this show? It's one thing to have these AIs, but, probably we just can't have, a rocket pack one week.
I don't see why you can't have a rocket pack. We just couldn't afford the rocket pack. There's a lot of, that was always a sort of test. Occasionally we would get pitches that were a little too far out there. But I think the staff locked into the tone of the show very quickly in the first season, that kind of grounded aspect of it. And then we're going to play with Flights of Fancy a little bit of the stuff from last season where you play the idea of simulation. Just the slow creep of that. And as we made the show, the world kept changing with us. So by the 5th season, there were topics that you could play with that 5 seasons ago you would have felt too high for us. Any questions?
I think that the show is really, I get really kills it with the visuals. And so recently we had this scene where Ruth's, she's driving the car with her boot, which is crazy. And so when you're known for having these really good visuals, and so my question was about Ruth's death, because I think in contrast to Shaw's death and Joss's death, it was really muted visually. Was there a reason that you guys did that? Like her actual death?
Having it happen off camera?
No. I mean, in terms of how it was kind of like the driving scene was really cool, and then her actual death was really kind of off camera.
Yes and no. For me, her death happens right there in that moment. And it is actually, that episode is directed by Fred Toy, who's one of our best directors, wonderful director. And it's that's kind of the best version of the shots that you don't really notice, but they're beautifully composed. Look at the 2 shots when Fitch is being pulled out of the car and the camera comes out of it, wraps around the windshield, finds Ruth. For me, in that moment, she's gone. The paramedics are working on her, and we leave you with a false sense of hope, which is, sadistic in that moment, but it's servicing the suspense of how, is she going to make it, is she not, and when she comes back, that's servicing the moment when you hear her voice on the phone, and you realize it's this transcendent moment. So for us, that's why you can't, the way the story was designed, you couldn't quite play that moment as a goodbye. And there's also, and obviously the show's it's not a realistic show. Right? It's a flight of fancy. But you also wanted to play with the idea that sometimes these scenes are sad and incomplete. And the heroism there, and her heroism to me, felt that much more heroic because it's not, there's not a sort of a big tableau shot with someone carrying her in their arms, or, she's a fucking superhero. Sometimes superheroes die alone, in the dark.
Now you have a question on the Ruth's sort of overall arc, basically once Amy was coming on full time to the show. What you didn't know about was going to be the Shaw and Ruth relationship. And I'm curious, when you brought Shaw in at that point, did you kind of know, because the relationship aside, did you kind of have a thought about where you wanted to take Shaw when she was sort of joining the show full time in season 3?
You mean a Nancy Drew?
Exactly. Is that continuity?
We got terribly excited about Relevance. There was an episode that we talked about through, incoming the second season. That was my directorial debut. It was an amazing episode, and kind of in hindsight, insane thing to do, to kind of do a whole episode where you have none of your series regulars. I didn't get to shoot with my partners, no one else did, foolishly. But Sarah was amazing, and we wanted to, we knew where we wanted to go with the character, but we weren't quite sure. You want to see if all the stars are going to align and it makes sense. But yeah, we always knew that we wanted to grow our team. The show starts as a two-hander, and the idea was always to sort of end as an ensemble.
Thanks for coming back.
No problem. I was going to piggyback off about the relationships. I like how they've grown, where Busco and Reese actually were totally one end, and now they ended up totally different. Now we're being co-partners, and then Shaw comes in, and Shaw's relationship with Rude and Busco and Reese. And then you also have the evolution of the relationship between Rude and Shaw. So all those have been added, and it's made the show grow a lot. But one of the original ones was actually Reese and Finch in the beginning. And there hasn't been a lot of their relationship in like season 4 and season 5. Will there be any more time when they get together other than the diner? What I think was David Stock in 414 was the last time they kind of went back to basically when they started this whole thing together. And now they've got a big team and they're worried about the rest of the team surviving.
I think you'd be really happy with the finale.
Or really, really unhappy. We have a long-standing tradition of getting people together again, and it doesn't work out so well.
I think that relationship has always been the heart of the show, whether it was on screen or understood. That was the start of this whole crazy endeavor, and Finch hiring him. We tried to even service that, as you saw at the end of episode 9 this year, where they were zooming under the bridge. Only it's all of them now, and it's going to take all of them to take this damn thing down.
We only have a couple minutes left. I wanted to ask Joe here to defend. Maybe he won't, or maybe you'll find out and he gets filtered afterwards. Was that something that you always know you would find out? And how did you decide this was the right time?
Yeah, I mean, it became one of those pressing things where I'm going to tell this guy, and the importance of not telling him always was, well, if he knew he doesn't have anyone to retreat to, so Samaritan will just find him like that, and they did. So that was this episode. It was like, once we read the guy in, his life was immediately in danger, and that's what we've been trying to tell him all these years, but he didn't want to listen anymore. So.
Also, I know in season 1, Peck did tell him, laid the whole thing out, and Fusco went and got a soda.
Yeah. You want something to drink? You want a soda or something?
And that's when he was almost still at the top. Do you have a question there?
Well, I'd say the show's been fantastic. The story missed. Sad to see it go. My question is about Elias. So near the end there, he was kind of part of the team, and I honestly never trusted him. I was going to read an ulterior motive, but Finch seemed to really find this respect for him, and I don't know. I guess I never really saw it. What did Finch see in Elias? Did he just see that himself that he'd been burying down in this really reserved person that he became after he did all those crimes in his past?
I think that's definitely part of it. There's some real similarities between those two characters. And I think there's last is one of these films that I like to like as a code. Right? There's a code there, and I think that's something, bear in mind that Finch himself was kind of an arch criminal, depending on how you look at him, teasing, et cetera. Been on the gun since he was a kid, and that's some commonality there with his lives. I think they share this kind of, not really ever being able to be, kind of a childhood cut off and sort of cast out, into the cold. That's something true for both of them. So a lot of commonality between the characters, and we just love reminding the audience of the part of Finch. We love working with Eric when I was really fun character guy. We also love reminding the audience that Finch wasn't completely, not a Boy Scout.
Thank you. So let me ask you guys here, for what can you tease about the finale? I know you have to watch it, but you hinted at some more sadness to come. Is this going to be Reservoir Dogs again?
The whole thing turns on a Fitbit.
There's a Fitbit. Yeah, I think, it was a chance for us to revisit some of those relationships that we haven't got a chance to get to before. And there's an awful lot compressed into it. But it's a more, I think a more emotional finale than I anticipated that we would have in some ways.
Like 50 songs in it, too.
Well, one thing is that we always had an idea for what the song would be, and the show would be, and what the last scene would be, and what the last song would be. And our amazing composer, Gianni, composed something so beautiful that I want the song in the score. So it didn't quite end exactly as being anticipated, but the body counts.
My last question is one I just thought of because we were joking right when we were coming in about self-driving cars and that person had an interest never got to that, and I forgot that this freaking episode happened. Was that just, again, as you're watching where technology is going, and especially having Root as the voice of it, it's like, yeah, there's got to be a self-driving car in this episode.
That car can really drive itself.
Right.
It's kind of cool. Like Sean said, there's so many things that happen just in the duration of this show that are mind-boggling. That people thought, science fiction prior to the show, and the world is rapidly getting even weirder.
Did part of the actor have to crouch down in that car too? We heard it. I don't know if you heard it. Crouch down in the car in last week's episode. That's the voice of the machine. Is she continuing that here?
I did bring Amy along. I think she got on the process script with me. Yeah, she's back there reading lines to him. So she was amazing. Like, it was raining, and she came out for everything. In fact, there was a scene, in the very beginning when Harold's, owning that dude and stealing the virus, or that whole scene in the beginning. But Amy was standing next to me, just off camera, and the house we were in had a hole in the ceiling, and it was pouring rain, so the rain's coming down on Amy in the house. It was bizarre, the whole thing. But without her there, I don't think you don't get the same sense of intimacy. Her voiceover later, you don't have a connection for Michael Emerson. If she's not there in the moment, you feel like she's in the room. And in reality, she was.
Well, guys, I am a huge fan of the show, you guys are a huge fan of the show. So thank you so much for being here.